He's running his country, and at least he's a leader, unlike what we have in this country.
Yeah, but again, he kills journalists that don't agree with him.
Well, I think our country does plenty of killing also, Joe. So.
The man has very strong control over a country. Now, it's a very different system, and I don't happen to like the system. But certainly in that system, he's been a leader far more than our president has been a leader.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. It's always been there, right? The affinity, the affection, the admiration, the cozying up, the justifying and defending, the embracing of Vladimir Putin, Russia's murderous dictator. We saw this bond emerge publicly between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Trump's public comments going back at least a decade now, a relationship the Russian government worked hard and privately and publicly to solidify and cement and advance in many ways. As Special Counsel Robert Mueller found, it, quote, interfered in the 2016 presidential election in sweeping and systematic fashion, end quote. As to why the Russian government will go to such lengths, simply put, again, from Mueller's investigation, quote, the investigation established that the Russian government perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome, and that the campaign expected it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts, end quote. This relationship of mutual benefit has played out. It has continued. It has intensified through all these years, through Trump's shocking remarks at the Helsinki summit, through Putin's parroting of Trump's whitewashing of the January 6th insurrection, and now through the brutal war in Ukraine, where Trump has escalated his rhetoric, siding with Putin and attacking the president of our democratic ally, Ukraine, calling Ukrainian President Zelensky the dictator instead of Russia's leader, and falsely claiming that it was Zelensky who started the war in his own country. Zelensky is fighting back today with his strongest pushback against Trump yet, saying Trump is, quote, living in a disinformation space. But the damage to the United States standing in the world is most likely done. Trump's words and actions have been heard loud and clear. The United States is right now today on the side of autocrats and dictators. And speaking of Trump's affinity for strong men, right now he's set to speak at an investment conference in Miami, backed by the sovereign wealth fund of another autocratic regime, the government of Saudi Arabia. It's where we start the hour with Michigan Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin. She's a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, and a former analyst at the CIA. I want to call on that third area of expertise, which you bring so skillfully to your role as a senator, and ask you what's happening right now in Ukraine. What are they having to do based on Donald Trump's public statements?
Yeah, well, look, I was just at the Munich Security Conference, and our bipartisan delegation met with Zelensky. We obviously watched the J.D. Vance speech live. I think right now, the Ukrainians who have been fighting, who have been trying to hold off the invasion of their country, are looking around the world and saying that the United States, the country that since World War II has been on the side of democracies, is now not only just maybe walking away, but actually siding with the aggressor, with the autocratic regime. I can't overstate how different this is in the post-World War II America. And I think Ronald Reagan must be rolling over in his grave right now to watch a Republican administration, after all he did to help us win the Cold War, now not only sort of supporting Putin's position at the table, but just sort of gushing over him in this bromance that they have. So it's a really disturbing day because it will have impacts on international security and on the security of the United States, full stop.
Can you explain that to us? How does that impact our ability to protect ourselves? How does that impact intelligence sharing? How does that impact what our allies will share with us?
Sure. Well, it certainly, I think, makes them hedge. And we saw that in Europe this past week. Again, the European leaders were like, look, we usually take our cues from the United States. We usually come to you first. We usually push off if the Russians want to make a deal with us or the Chinese want to make a deal with us, because we'd always prefer to be working with you and take our cues from you. That's now not the case. They will openly say, like, you've been the leader for 70 years. We're not so sure you're the leader of the next, 100 years. So that's not good. When they perceive us as weak, they perceive us as not serious. But I think more importantly is, you can think whatever you want if you're, watching the situation in Ukraine. But guess who's taking notes on everything that's happening? The Chinese government. The Chinese, which are our major competitor, they're looking and they're basically saying America just doesn't have the willpower to actually defend when a democracy is invaded. That's important for us to know, because maybe we're interested in taking over territory like Taiwan. So I just think it's not just about Ukraine. It's about the signal it sends about America retreating from the world and being totally fine to cede leadership to places like Russia or China.
What do you hear when you hear an American president say, it doesn't matter what happens there, we have an ocean? I mean, the history of Pearl Harbor and 9/11 is that those oceans didn't do us much good here at home.
Yeah, I mean, look, it would be great if we lived in a world where the only threats to the U.S. homeland came from people walking right up to our borders, right? It's just look at what happens across the world on a daily basis. There are plots to kidnap and kill American citizens every single week. There are plots to attack our homeland every single week. And I think the idea that somehow we're protected by some ocean, when we just had a domestic terrorism attack, 2 of them, right around Christmas time, right, New Orleans and Las Vegas. The idea that we're somehow separated from the world when we have an incredibly connected and globalized world is just, at this point, ignorance. That's just willful ignorance. It doesn't make sense.
You've got a lot of examples of the Republicans collapsing onto themselves and ceasing to be a political party at all, let alone one with beliefs that are the same from the time the sun comes up to when it goes down. Their beliefs about Putin might be at least a temporary exception. I'm going to show you something that Senator Roger Wicker said yesterday to CNN.
Do you think that Putin can be trusted in these negotiations?
No. Putin is a war criminal and should be in jail for the rest of his life, if not executed. Vladimir Putin has violated every tenet of international law.
At least as of the time of that interview, Wicker not on board with Trump's embrace of Vladimir Putin. Do you have any back channel to Republicans or do you dare to hope that they'll stand up to Trump on the issue of Ukraine?
Well, look, we don't need a back channel. He's the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. I'm on that committee. I'm the most junior member. And I was traveling with him and others to Munich this past weekend. And I think it is interesting to me that today, just the sheer number of Republicans who have come out in the Senate and actually said, no, I don't think it's a good thing to cozy up to Putin. No, I don't think this leads to good places. I wish they would do that on domestic issues, right? But it is interesting to watch. And it's because they know the precedent this sets. It's because they all complained about the really bad pullout from Afghanistan and the video and images that left the world with. They know that the same thing times 10 is going to happen if we just hand over Ukraine to Putin. So it's been interesting to me. You don't need a back channel. They've said more today in the past 10 hours than they have about almost any other domestic issue. And I would love, if this was the thing that helped get them a little bit more backbone on pushing back on Donald Trump. It does not make us more safe.
What do you do then if they're going to find their spines in this news cycle? And I share your hope that they put actions behind their public statements of the last 48 hours. But what do you do with the people they've already acquiesced to having in the cabinet, people like Tulsi Gabbard?
Yeah, I mean, this is where intelligence sharing, it's hard to sometimes understand how the decisions that happen in Washington can actually result in people being less safe in a place like Michigan, where I represent, right? When you put these people in charge of the intelligence community, they're making decisions in the dead of night that American citizens never hear about. They're making choices about plots and how to disrupt them. They're working with our allies and partners to share in real time information to protect the U.S. homeland. And people have no idea what these people do every single day. And now you're putting people in charge who just do not have the character or the competence to be in those jobs. We don't complain about these people just because they're from another party. The president has the right to nominate people. I complain about them because they will make us less safe. I do not trust their judgment in the dead of night. And now our allies will be hedging and thinking to themselves, do I share information about Russia with the U.S.? Do I share this tactical information with the United States if they're just going to turn around and maybe share it with their new, partners, the Russians? It just is, people don't understand that it will make us less safe.
This was argued sort of on the sidelines of a very abbreviated presidential contest. But the public didn't decide that Trump's affinity for Putin was okay. I mean, his hardline supporters at his rallies feel that way about Putin, sort of the Tucker Carlson slice. But 81% of Americans do not trust Vladimir Putin. How do you make sure that public pressure keeps Republicans from acquiescing to Trump's capitulation to Russia?
Well, look, I mean, it's already happening. Michigan has a big Ukrainian-American population, and they've already organized a rally for Sunday. I mean, people are speaking up, and that's from a state that the president won, President Trump won, and a swing state. So we need people to demonstrate their voice on this issue and a bunch of other issues. And I think, again, he's been flooding the zone with so many different decisions, so many different announcements that people are not sure where to look. Now they're starting to figure out what is truly like strategic and irreversible that he could do that is worth their time in speaking out about. And so it's coming out from the grassroots. That rally wasn't planned by any senators. That's Ukrainian Americans saying, we're not going to let this happen.